You're someone who falls asleep just fine at the beginning of the night, but then you feel like you're waking up every couple hours all night long. And I know that that's technically broken sleep, but I want you to know that your sleep isn't actually broken and that your body hasn't actually forgotten how to sleep. What's most likely happening is that you're becoming fully awake during transitions that most people would sleep through. And once you understand why this happens, the whole pattern starts to make a lot more sense. I'm Meredith Louden. I'm a sleep coach and I used to have insomnia for 16 years. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why this waking up every couple hours keeps happening, what turns a brief normal awakening into a long, frustrating period of wakefulness throughout the night, and how to fix it. Here's something that most people don't realize about sleep. Sleep doesn't actually happen in just one long, continuous stretch. It happens in repeating cycles. Most sleep cycles last about 80 to 100 minutes, and they naturally vary throughout the night. And most people move through between 4 to 6 of these cycles typically over the course of a full night's sleep. At the end of each cycle, as your brain transitions from one sleep cycle into the next, there's a natural moment of lighter sleep in between. And for most people, this transition just happens completely unconsciously without noticing it. Your brain just kind of speeds up a little bit, checks everything's okay, and then it immediately slows back down into the next sleep cycle. In other words, briefly waking up during the night isn't unusual at all. In fact, many people do wake up several times throughout the night. They just don't remember it because they drift right back to sleep. But for some people, especially those who have been dealing with sleep anxiety or insomnia, that transition can feel much more noticeable. So instead of, quietly moving into the next sleep cycle, the brain fully wakes up. And then you can't fall back asleep as easily because the brain has woken up, more completely. So if you are waking up every 2 hours or so, that's pretty consistent with the natural length of a sleep cycle. Your brain is waking up kind of right at that transition point. So the waking up itself isn't really a mystery. So the real question is, why does your brain stay awake instead of moving into the next sleep cycle? There are a few things that can turn a completely normal sleep transition into a prolonged period of wakefulness. And chances are you're doing at least one of these things without even realizing it. The first one is what I like to call the sleep math trap. The moment that you wake up, your brain just immediately wants to check the time. And the moment you see what time it is, then you start calculating. It's 2 a.m. I've been asleep for 2 hours. I only have 4 hours until my alarm's going to go off. What if I don't fall back asleep? What if tomorrow is awful? And it just spirals. And just like that, a completely normal moment in the middle of the night has now turned into a stressful event. Your brain becomes more alert, your stress response activates, and now falling back asleep just feels impossible, even though you were just fast asleep moments ago. The time on the clock didn't cause that. The meaning that you attached to the time did. Now, the next one is trying too hard to fall back asleep. Sleep is an automatic process. Your body already knows how to do it. But the moment that you start trying to make it happen, you've shifted from rest mode into effort mode. And effort is the opposite of how you get to sleep. Sleep isn't something that you do. It's something that your brain allows to happen when it no longer believes that there's a good enough reason to stay awake. So the trying itself creates more alertness, which is the exact opposite of what you're going for. And here's one that most people never consider. Once waking up at 2 a.m. becomes a pattern, your brain starts to anticipate it. It starts treating that time as something to monitor, something to be ready for, something to look for. So even before that natural sleep cycle transition happens, your brain is already preparing to wake up subconsciously because it's learned that something important happens at this time because you've been calculating, right? Or you've been freaking out. And so it doesn't understand that there's no reason to be alert because you've kind of accidentally associated the middle of the night as being a problem. Your brain has learned that something important happens at this time of night, and so it makes sure that you're alert for it. This is how just, maybe 1 or 2 random awakenings during the middle of the night can turn into a nightly pattern that happens much more often because it's happening automatically at this point. Your brain has essentially set an internal alarm, not to torture you, but because it just learned that that's what it thinks it's supposed to do. Quick side note, if you've been struggling with your sleep for months or years, you're definitely going to want to check out my free masterclass too. This is where I go deep into the exact strategy I teach my clients to end chronic insomnia for good, including the subconscious ways you've been accidentally sabotaging your sleep without even realizing it. That link is in the description. Now let's talk about how to stop reinforcing this pattern. The single most practical thing you can do tonight is simply not look at the time. Turn your clock away, put your phone face down, cover up anything that has the time on it. Remove the clocks, right? Because you don't actually need that information. The time doesn't tell you anything useful. It simply gives your brain something to start thinking about. And the calculating almost always leads to the same place: stress. And stress just keeps you awake longer. So now that the time is out of the picture, here's what to focus on instead. Instead of lying there and thinking, I have to fall back asleep right now, shift your only goal to something else, which is resting. Not sleeping, just resting. Your body is still recovering while you are lying there quietly. Your nervous system is still benefiting from the stillness. So instead of treating being awake in the night like a problem to solve, treat it as, oh, this is just quiet, restful time now. No big deal. When rest becomes the goal instead of sleep, there's less pressure, less effort, and many people find that sleep just returns to them when they're not looking for it. And this next one is something I personally still use to this day, which is to choose one comforting response. When you wake up during the night, having one familiar, comforting response can make a really big difference. Not because it's a trick to, make yourself fall asleep, but because it gently reminds your brain that this moment is safe. Remember that your brain woke up expecting something important to happen. And so your job now is to simply show it that nothing important is happening. There's nothing to monitor. There's nothing to solve. There's nothing that you need to do right now. So maybe you hug your favorite pillow, even a stuffed animal. Pull the blanket, all the way up to your face. Put on an eye mask or use a weighted blanket. Or just rest a pillow on top of your chest. That's super easy to do. Curl up into the sleeping position that feels the coziest. Some people even flip all the way around and sleep with their head at the opposite end of the bed. And I know it sounds funny, but sometimes that little change is enough for your brain to feel like it's starting fresh. So if that's something you do, I'd love to know in the comments. It'd be funny to see how many people have tried that. For me, I notice that if my mind or body is restless, I simply shift into actually the mountain climber sleeping position. And over the years, my brain has come to associate that position with letting go and drifting back to sleep. It's kind of become one of my own brain's little cues that, all is well, we don't need to do anything, and it's safe to go to sleep. And I don't stay in that position all night personally, because it's not the most ergonomic, right, for your neck or your back. But momentarily, it's enough to just get in that position, and then my nervous system calms back down and I can fall back asleep. So I think of it less as trying to fall asleep and more of reminding your brain that it's safe to just lay there in bed. And over time, your brain begins associating these middle of the night awakenings with comfort and familiarity instead of panic and calculation. Here's what I really want you to remember. You don't need to control your sleep cycles. You can't anyway. And trying to is part of what's making this harder. What you can do is stop turning a, brief normal awakening during the night into an emergency that your brain now feels like it needs to solve. Your body already knows how to complete the next sleep cycle. The question is whether your mind lets it. Your sleep isn't broken. Your body hasn't forgotten how to sleep. Your brain has simply learned to treat a normal sleep cycle transition like something important. And just like it learned that pattern, it can learn a different one. I'd really love to know the nuances of what you've been experiencing. So does your sleep break at kind of regular intervals throughout the night, every couple of hours? Or do you sleep well during the first part of the night and then you notice that you kind of wake up too early once it's closer to morning? I'd love to know. So let me in the comments what your biggest sleep challenge has been lately. And if your main struggle is waking up specifically around 2 to 4 a.m. and not being able to fall back asleep, go watch this video next. I walk you through 3 techniques that you can use in that exact moment to help your brain and body naturally settle back into sleep. And you can watch it right here.